I'm Nicole Silberstein, e-commerce editor at Retail Touchpoints, and I'm so excited today because we are going to be diving into the red hot space of cannabis retail with one of the co-founders of the Artistry, Lauren Fontaine. Lauren, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there's a lot of growth and development happening in the world of cannabis right now, but even in this very increasingly crowded space, you have a really unique angle on the retail experience for the sector. So let's start there. Tell us about the ethos and philosophy around the Artistry. You just opened up your fifth location in California, right?
That's right. So the Artistry is an art-focused cannabis brand, and we created this brand with the mission of promoting local artists and highlighting the synergy between the arts and cannabis. There's always been a really strong connection between art and cannabis. Artists use it as a form of creative inspiration, and people consume cannabis as a way to heighten their own enjoyment of the arts. So we wanted to bring that to the forefront in our stores. And that means that we've designed retail spaces that function as a hybrid between an art gallery and a retail store, where we have artwork on display throughout the space. And the spaces are actually designed to look like art galleries so that our customers can come in and explore and have this nice experience that's not just about cannabis shopping.
So, I mean, the thing about this is that for most of the country, the idea of retail spaces for recreational cannabis is still really new. Out here where I am in New Jersey, we're just now getting our first shops. So it's not something that a lot of consumers have experienced. But as somebody who's been in this space in California for a while, where the concept is more evolved, I wanted to just back up a second, ask you what the standard dispensary experience is typically like, so we can kind of understand, get a baseline understanding of what the retail experience for this sector generally looks like.
Sure. So we have had medical dispensaries here in California for a long time, and the standard layout from the beginning was a waiting room where you would check in, and normally there'd be someone behind glass, like even bulletproof glass, checking your ID and your medical recommendation. And then you would have to wait there and get buzzed into the actual showroom, which would be a space with a counter. Usually all the products would be behind the counter, and somebody, a bud tender would be standing behind there. And possibly they could show you some of the products. Maybe you weren't even really able to view them. You would just pick what you wanted, and then they would check you out. So that's kind of been the standard model for a long time here in LA and, in other states with a history of medical dispensaries. And that was something that we really wanted to break away from. So we wanted to create a location when we created the first Artistry that didn't feel like a dispensary, that felt totally different from what people were used to, because we thought it would make people feel more comfortable being in a shopping environment that was not like a medical dispensary, but felt more like another high-end retail atmosphere. And we also wanted to help normalize cannabis and show people like this can be completely different from what you might have envisioned in your own mind.
Tell me a little bit then how you broke away from that kind of standard store, like dispensary storefront setup.
Yeah, another aspect of the standard store is that you can't see into the building. So that was a big thing for us. So usually there'd be, blacked out or frosted windows, or maybe no windows at all, because people were concerned about privacy and security. So, definitely you couldn't see into the showroom from the sidewalk. And so for us, we really wanted to create a space where if you were walking by, you wouldn't even know that it was a dispensary, but it just looked like a nice place where you feel comfortable walking inside. So we designed the first Artistry as a wide open space without a waiting room area. You just stepped inside. There was a check-in desk. The space felt open, and we had lots of art displays along with all of the cannabis displays. And we displayed the cannabis in a way that also made it feel more interactive and high-end. So that means we had a design firm that came up with custom glass cabinetry that kind of looks like museum style displays, free floating throughout the space. We have, built-in metal shelves and wood cabinetry as well. And so, I don't like using the comparison of like an Apple store, because I feel like we're not that. But we have the modern feel of that where you can kind of wander around and see all of the products, but while also feeling more creative and artistic and warm and inviting.
Yeah. I mean, the Apple Store is a good reference because everybody knows immediately the feeling you get in an Apple Store. It's open, it's bright, and it sounds like that's some of the ways that you're stepping away from what used to be kind of the standard makeup of one of those stores. But another thing you're doing is you're not just selling. You've also created a lot of different experiential areas in some of your locations, right?
That's right. So, for example, in the West Hollywood and the Fresno stores, we have a cultivation room, a clone cube, sometimes we call it. So, it's this big glass room in the center of the showroom where people can step inside, and we have cannabis plants, real cannabis plants growing. People can look at them. Some people have never actually seen a live plant in person. So, it's really fun for people. And then we also house clones that we sell. So we have clone plants in there and people can buy them and take them home. And we wanted that element to be an educational, experiential aspect of the space. So that was why we designed that. We not because we're going to be growing plants and be able to sell the yields of those, but we created it as part of the space to be another experience within the space. And then likewise, we have things like custom murals by local artists in all of our different locations. We have custom store in stores, we call them, where there's kind of a dedicated area that brands can take over and set it up and decorate it and make it feel like their own mini boutique within our artistry space.
Are you selling the art that's on display in the stores?
All of the art's for sale. So we function like an art gallery, which means the artists can display their pieces through us and it's being sold by them. And we're not actually taking a commission. So unlike a gallery, which would take some percentage of the sales, we're providing the display space free of charge to the artists. And we don't take any share of the proceeds of the art sale. But it is all for sale. And we have local artists to each location. So, Riverside based artists in the Riverside store, Fresno artists in Fresno. And then we change the art every 3 months. So there's new exhibits coming in. So that's another great experiential aspect of our spaces is that they're constantly changing, which is really fun for me. The art part of our business is probably my favorite part of my job. Because the space transforms every 3 months. We might have art that's one style and then the next exhibit, it's something completely different. And so that gives the space a whole refresh. And it's nice for customers because they get to come in and see something new.
Does the art have to be cannabis inspired or is it thematically separate from the theme of the store?
It's separate. Sometimes we've have had some art where there's some sort of cannabis theme or photography, but that's not what most of our art is. It doesn't have to have anything to do with cannabis. Some of the artists we work with are cannabis consumers, some aren't. So that's not, a criteria for allowing art in the store. We really just look at the works themselves and the artists and the community and, fitting it in with whatever's going on in the world at that time.
So tell me about the consumption lounge in West Hollywood, because this sounds really fun. It sounded to me like almost like a cannabis bar. Like you would go to a regular bar for alcohol, but you can come there for cannabis products. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair analogy. So it's, set up like a restaurant bar in the sense of we have table seating, we have a big outdoor patio space. So it's kind of an indoor outdoor feel where the floor plan is open. And we have one wall where we can completely open the doors. So, in LA, the indoor outdoor vibe is really big. And so it's nice for us because we have good weather here. So we could take advantage of that, but also it helps with ventilation, which is a big thing in a consumption lounge. So it is, and there is also an actual bar area, with bar seating, and we have lots of different interesting devices that you can use to consume cannabis, whether it's like a student glass gravity bong or different types of dab equipment, or other types of consumption that people maybe haven't even tried before. We make cannabis infused cocktails. We have food available in partnership with a neighboring restaurant. So you can order food and have it on site as well. And it's also a space where we've been doing a lot of programming. So as part of our focus on promoting the arts in the lounge space, the way that we do that is by having a lot of local entertainment. So we have comedy nights, we have live music, DJ nights, we do art classes like puff and paint art classes, yoga, movie nights. So we're doing a lot of things in addition to just having the space available. And that's been a really great way for people to kind of like get more inundated with cannabis culture and enjoy the space.
You mentioned ventilation. Are there any other special accommodations you have to make in the design of these spaces, especially those places where people are going to be smoking?
Yeah, so odor control is always a very big concern for, municipalities that are licensing businesses. They don't want any bad effects on the neighbors or people complaining. And so we did have to come up with a very robust odor control plan and, hire a professional engineer that works in this field to come up with special ventilation equipment on our premises. And if you came in, you would see like these big units everywhere that are moving the air through the space to help eliminate any sort of odor issues. And our lounge is also on the second floor of the building. So the first floor is the retail level. The second floor is the smoking lounge. And the third floor is our non-smoking cannabis consumption studio. So being on the second floor, the patio is also above street level. That really helps with ventilation too, because we're not actually at street level. So when people are sitting on the patio smoking, most of the air is actually going up.
What does your standard clientele look like? Are you drawing in mostly younger consumers, or are you finding that some of these more elevated spaces are bringing in older crowds?
Yeah, so we see a huge diversity of visitors to our space, which is great. And we kind of always have, even with the retail element of it. So we opened a retail store in West Hollywood in 2019, and then we added the consumption space this year. And because it is, a nice, like warm, welcoming vibe, I think that a lot of people that maybe wouldn't be the stereotypical cannabis consumer feel comfortable in our spaces. And so we get a lot of older consumers, like 60 plus people. We get a lot of women, professionals. So it's not just the 20, 30 something, core cannabis consumer demographic that we see even in the consumption space. I really do see a lot of people like me, like 40 something mom that comes with like their friends to go to dinner, or tourists from out of town that could be, young or old. We see a lot of those as well. But it's great to actually see the huge range of types of people that come in and enjoy the space.
Well, that actually feels really indicative of kind of a shift in this space away from some of these, stereotypes we've had for a while of like kind of the deadbeat pothead. How have you seen behaviors and attitudes surrounding cannabis usage kind of evolve over the last few years, and how are you tapping into that? It feels kind of like a new era. It feels like there's a new community developing around this.
Yeah, it's really an exciting time to be in this industry because things are evolving rapidly. And I have seen, in the past 10 or so years, a huge shift in people's views of cannabis, how it fits into daily life, and, the way people consume it. And now a big thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people are making the switch from alcohol to cannabis. So they're really seeing cannabis as a safer alternative to alcohol, something that is easier on their body. There's ways to consume it now where it's very precisely dosed. So you can really control the experience. And then there's a lot of beverages now that are kind of designed to, mimic a wine or a beer as far as the effect that it would have on you, but with cannabis. So that's something in the lounge that I think, it's a great place for people to learn about cannabis as an alternative to other things, or it doesn't have to be an alternative, but just something you can try one day and then maybe you're still drinking alcohol the other day. But our whole mission with this, creating this brand that was different and unique and innovative, was to really help shift people's perception of cannabis and make them feel more comfortable with it and more excited to try cannabis if they hadn't before, or if they were a consumer, bringing it out into the forefront of society by having a public venue where you can actually come and smoke, and it's not hidden. It's not, a dark, dingy environment. It's a place that very much feels like any other nice restaurant in the city of West Hollywood. And you can come and openly have cannabis. For me, it's just a huge step forward for the cannabis movement and for the culture. And I think it's really important that there are spaces like this. I really hope that cities continue to allow more consumption lounges, because I think that's what's really going to make cannabis, people feel more comfortable with cannabis, and it truly become part of mainstream culture. Like, it's, now legal, but there is still a stigma, and people still just have a lot of fear about what's going to happen if people are openly consuming it. So, we've set ourselves out to be a good example of, no, this is what it could be. It could be a very safe place where people can come and have fun responsibly. And this is something that's really needed.
And it could feel almost very familiar, because from the pictures I've seen of the consumption lounge, it feels like any other kind of high-end bar. It looks like a very familiar space. It's just that the product offering is slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we were going for. We weren't trying to make something that was like stereotypical, like psychedelic or, dark cigar lounge vibe or anything like that, but just exactly a place like you would feel comfortable going and having lunch, or, anyone, it feels familiar. It feels just like another extension of mainstream culture.
Mm-hmm. I think, on the legal side of things, there's still some catching up to do with where consumers are. And it's still a little bit like murky, especially as you talk about, in different states. Um, I'm wondering how you navigate some of those kind of murky legal waters, especially when you're, advertising on places like digital channels. Like, how are you getting the word out about your shops, about the spaces you've created, without getting in trouble?
Yeah, it's hard. There's still a lot of restrictions on what you can do with cannabis. So, not being able to advertise on things like Instagram or Facebook or Google ads. If we do text messaging campaigns or things, we can't use a lot of language that, we would normally use to communicate whatever's happening at our location. So we're hampered in that regard as well. So we have to be creative. So, press is a good kind of form of marketing for something, especially like a consumption lounge. We do, our own direct social media marketing through our own Instagram channels and in partnerships with all of our brands. There's the cannabis platforms like Weed Maps where, we can advertise. So we definitely utilize those. Um, and it's hard. You have to just, really pay attention to what all the restrictions are. For example, in LA, a cannabis company can have a billboard, but there's a lot of things that can't be depicted there. But in our Fresno store, that city doesn't even allow any cannabis business to advertise out of home. So we're not legally allowed to even have a billboard or, bus shelter ad or anything like that. So it's a challenge.
So before I let you go, I'd love to hear kind of where you see things going from here, both for the industry and for the artistry. Any plans to perhaps open a location in New Jersey sometime soon? I would love that.
I would love that too. As I mentioned, I'm from New Jersey. Yes, so we are definitely still expanding. We actually just found out that we received another new license in the city of Ventura, which is really exciting. They just released those results a few days ago. So we will be opening a couple more stores in California for certain, and we are going to be applying for additional opportunities. And I would love to be able to be in New Jersey, in New York. You know, in California, we're kind of like numb to like cannabis culture in a way because we're so used to it being a big part of, you know, it's been around for a long time, right? So we sometimes forget that, like, you can't just drive down the block and go to a dispensary because I'm somewhere where there's hundreds of stores, but you know, where you are, yeah, it's not like that. And so I would love for us to be able to share our brand and our vision with these new places where people aren't as familiar. And I think that's where our business can really shine, is because we have a platform for promoting artists, but we also have a design and an ethos where it's meant to be able to kind of seamlessly integrate into a new community where people might be more apprehensive about cannabis by having such a nice storefront design and a warm and welcoming feel, and by kind of fighting against whatever people might have envisioned in their head that a dispensary would be. You know, we really try and be the opposite of that. So I think it would be amazing if we could be able to open in some other states.
There's definitely demand out here. I mean, there was one store that just opened up. The line was around the block for weeks. Oh, so I hope that you can get out here at some point too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for kind of taking us inside the artistry and into this really fascinating world of cannabis retail. It was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us for this episode of Experience Insiders. We always love to hear about your own experiences, both as a professional and a consumer. So be sure to drop us a comment or let us know what you thought, or if you have any follow-up questions for Lauren. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for more candid conversations with leading brands soon.